So Riot just dropped their March 2023 dev update, and although they didn't mention or tease anything specific for future sets like new champions or mechanics, they did talk about how the future of TFT will be changing with the way they patch, develop and release. So in this video, I'll break down what both Peter Whalen and Mortdog said and give some of my thoughts. So let's get right into it.
So I'm going to preempt this by sharing our excitement for what combos you can uncover with Infiniteam, Riftwalkers, Ezreal, and our mid-set mechanic update, Glitched Out Carousels.
So there's already a problem here. There aren't that many more combos since the mid-set was kinda small and doesn't bring that much change, unlike what we've seen in the past. So for me, the changes that come in the mid-set aren't really that exciting or interesting.
We've seen mid-sets as ways to correct player pains with the current set, like when we shifted from Shadow items to Radiant items in Reckoning, but also as a way to expand upon things players love with the current set.
And Peter mentioned expanding on hero augments, but I'm under the impression that hero augments haven't really been that widely loved by the community and they've been quite polarizing. So even if they expanded on hero augments, it's still very possible it just won't be well received by the community because the player pain is the mechanic itself, which they don't remove in mid-sets. And honestly, the expansion set 8.5 brings to hero augments isn't really much of an expansion at all, and there's nothing new to really write home about. This is unlike set 7.5, where the dragon mechanic was completely flipped on its head and many more dragons came in to expand on the theme more. And that's the point they're trying to address by removing mid-sets. Creatively and competitively, minor updates just aren't even remotely as exciting as entirely new sets. This will also put an end to mid-sets only having 3 months to develop after the launch of the primary set. And with sets having more time to develop, they can really iron out the kinks and avoid problems like dragons and hero augments not quite landing as they should have because of the time limitation to truly test these mechanics.
Simply put, mid-sets don't bring players back to TFT like a fully new set, and for the majority of players, the level of changes feel negligible or just too small. So while we've used the mid-sets to up the quality of the current set for our most passionate and competitive players, for the majority of players, those updates just don't hit the desire for new strategies, nor do they bring in dramatic and cool thematic shifts. And it's worth adding that even our most passionate and competitive players who benefit the most from our mid-set improvements, they too would prefer an entirely new set.
I mean, yeah, from what Mort said, mid-sets can really feel redundant since the lack of massive updates just dwindles player interest and numbers even more. And that includes both casual and competitive players, as everyone just wants to see and play around with something new.
More sets. This is something we've been hard at work on for quite some time now, and we're super excited to share it with you.
TFT has historically been an incredibly small team for the size of the game, and we're still pretty scrappy. But over the past year, we've been hiring new folks and training up additional developers like crazy.
So I think they've been working on expanding the team from at least back in November 2022, when they mentioned the team in Singapore getting more ambitious and exploring a broader range of styles with cosmetics, like with the Everything Goes on board. So I'm glad to hear and see that the team is continuing to expand and become more ambitious.
Deliver 3 full-size sets every year.
Each of the 3 sets is going to have a longer production timeline that will allow for a higher quality release. That's because each set now has its own development pod, and they'll be able to work at the same time. This will become especially visible when our 10th set launches later this year.
So from what I'm understanding, there will be 3 teams that each work on a different TFT set at the same time. With 3 sets releasing each year, that means each set will have 4 months on the live server, and we cycle through the teams for the next set. So that means that each individual set will have 8 months of development whilst the other teams have their sets on the live server. And it seems that set 10 will be the first set in this new cycle. Honestly, this sounds fantastic to maintain a really strong and exciting cycle of content for TFT. The only possible negative thing I can think of is what happens when one team is far better or far worse than the others. Hopefully the teams are great across the board, and I imagine they will be because they're overseen by great designers like Whitrock, Kent and Mort.
So expect events to come in all shapes and sizes as we use them to spice up sets a few patches in, or even join in on Riot-wide moments.
Ooh, Now this is interesting because what have Riot been releasing recently? Well, Riot Forge has been releasing a lot of trailers for games they're pumping out. So we may see some event or a mention in the TFT set, especially with lore-driven games like Mage Seeker or Nunu's standalone game Song of Nunu. But one thing I'm certain about is that we will see something around the release of Arcane Season 2, considering how highly it's anticipated across the world.
It's taken us a lot of time to build up to this capacity, and we still need a little bit more here. So, Glitched Out won't be our last mid-set. We'll have one more for our 9th set later this year.
This statement is a bit worrying, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of Glitched Out, to say the least, so if set 9 also has a mid-set, then I'm somewhat skeptical of it being any good, especially with Peter mentioning that they still need more time to build their team up.
The future of TFT is so exciting because Riot Games is heavily invested in it. Together with you, we've proved that TFT is the genre-defining auto-battler.
It's good to hear that Riot is heavily investing in TFT, and yet it makes sense because, as Mort says, TFT is the biggest auto-battler out there. At the very least, as a content creator and a TFT fan, I'm really glad to hear this because I know TFT's future still looks great.
Because after our 10th set hits, and it will hit.
It's a very small mention, but Mort is talking about set 10 here and how heavily set 10 will hit. Now, I've had a video in the works for a while now about how set 10 will be the most successful set ever, and that's before this dev update released, where we've learned that set 10 is likely to be the first set that has been in development for an entire 8 months. I'll make the video soon, but how successful do you reckon a musical TFT set would be from a video game company that has a reputation for making absolutely phenomenal music?
At Riot, we've always loved music. In fact, in certain countries, people don't call us a game company, they call us a music company, and they say we're making games to do marketing for our music.
I also reckon they had plans for set 10 back when the cosmetic TFT team in Singapore was exploring more styles. And I'm certain that if they made an Everything Goes On board, then they must have already considered making a KDA version considering how popular that group is. And they can make many more boards like that with the sheer amount of popular songs that Riot has produced across their games. So for those reasons, I'm expecting set 10 to be the most successful TFT set to date because of the sheer development time and how much money they'll rake in from cosmetics. Although I am worried that set 10 may be released in December because a massive issue with set 8 was the launch occurring just before the holidays, which caused a long gap in the patch cycle. Anyway, this dev update was very short, but the changes are massive and I'm excited to see the future of TFT. The current format for sets has always been a pain because it could take an entire set to get the balance right, but then the mid-set comes around and resets that balance with new champions and traits, so we'd need to wait longer for the mid-set to be appropriately balanced. I mean, set 8 took 2.5 months to be well balanced, but that was quickly replaced by Glitched Out. At least now we'll have 4 months to fully enjoy a well-developed and balanced set, its mechanics and units. So thank you to the dev team for working on TFT, bringing much more to the table and continuing to redefine the auto-battler genre. But yeah, what do you think of this dev update? Do you think this is good news or bad news? Let me know in the comments and remember to subscribe. Check out my other videos, like my most recent one where Riot may have accidentally leaked the mechanic for set 9. And as always, thank you for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.